It is, Sharon, and it's so crazy to me. And that's why I wrote that first chapter, that we are programmed for the opposite. And it could, programmed through our families, through our community, through our society. Even you give someone a compliment, they're like, oh, no, 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 no. We don't even take it in.
Hello and welcome to the Metta Hour podcast with Sharon Salzberg. I'm Lily Cushman. I produce this podcast, and today we're here with episode 242, the return of Emma Seppälä, Ph.D. Emma's not been on the podcast for quite a long time, since about 2017. She returns this week to talk about her new book, Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos. And Emma is a real powerhouse. She's a best-selling author, a psychologist, a research scientist. She teaches executives at the Yale School of Management and is a faculty director also at the Yale School of Management in their Women's Leadership program. She's also the science director of Stanford's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. Her expertise lies in the science of happiness, emotional intelligence, and social connection. So we're thrilled to have her back. And much of this conversation is centered around the new book, Sovereign. Some of the key themes that have to do with facing our self-imposed beliefs, really working on the relationship to ourselves, this inner critic, this kind of deep self-criticism that has evolved into self-loathing, and how we can start working with these internalized stories that we have running. And Emma's offering a lot of different tools to work with these things. She also writes a lot about self-compassion in the book, the science of self-compassion. Also, Sharon takes the opportunity to just ask Emma about some of the recent research that's happened since the last time she was on the pod, asking her about the research of loving kindness, meditation, research around happiness. So there's some really interesting information there too. And as usual, we close out the episode with a guided meditation by our wonderful guest. So that's what you have in store for you today. Before we get into it, a quick announcement. This week we're starting Sharon's brand new online course, Equanimity, a 10-day wisdom course. It starts Wednesday, June 19th. So if you're hearing this episode right when it comes out, you still have some time to join us. This program is all about the balance born of wisdom. Equanimity is like the secret sauce of spiritual practice. It's how we can infuse our compassion with wisdom, how we can put our mindfulness practice into context. It allows us to stay engaged with life without being overwhelmed by it. So you can head over to Sharon's website to join us. This is a flexible 10-day program, so you'll have lifetime access to it even if you can't do it with us right away. You will have it all there waiting for you whenever you have time to do the program. So that's at sharonsalzberg.com. And again, it starts Wednesday, the 19th of June. Okay, so let's get to the conversation. Emma Seppälä and Sharon Salzberg.
Hello, Emma, and welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Sharon. It's always so nice to be here with you.
How are you? Where are you recording from today?
I'm good. I'm in Prescott, Arizona today.
Oh, I've been there. I did a retreat there. It was freezing cold.
Oh, really?
Yeah, strangely enough.
Yeah, it's warm here now. It's lovely.
So we're here together, which is a delightful thing, celebrating the release of your brand new book, which came out in April of 2024, called Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and chaos. Now, that's a powerhouse of a title.
Thank you. Yeah, I was trying to find a title that would match the energy that I experienced writing the book. I really feel like the book came to me as a kind of a current, um, and asked to be written in a way, and I did, and I needed to find a title that matched the energy of it.
So let's start with the term sovereign, how that concept came to you, how you define it, and how it became the theme and title of this book.
Yeah, as a psychologist, there are so many terms that we have, but I couldn't find a term that really expressed this idea of inner freedom, um, and what I mean by that is a sense of agency. And I think a lot of us feel like, oh well, I have agency, I have freedom to do what I want, and so forth. And if we live in in Western countries or relatively free societies, that's true on the one hand, and on the other hand, we also often, without realizing it, fall for behaviors, for thought patterns, for ways of relating to ourselves that are actually not life affirming, that are on the opposite, destructive. And we get bound to them without even realizing it. And so, sovereignty, and I can give you examples of what I mean by that, but sovereignty is really having the awareness of those things and then being able to break free from them and to live on a whole other level of inner freedom and agency. So, just as a quick example, I mean, one way that I teach executives at the Yale School of Management. These are sort of high level managers, leaders, and I often see that the greatest thing standing in their way is not any kind of glass ceiling or any kind of external factor, but an internal one, which is their relationship with their own selves. And I know, Sharon, you think about this a lot too. But
Mhm.
I mean, whenever I ask how many of you are self critical, 95% of the room raises their hand. And from a psychological perspective, self criticism is self loathing. And that is so heartbreaking when you think about it. And, the one or two people in the room who do not raise their hand, inevitably, they're the most powerful people in the room. They are the most that's that term, sovereignty. They have a life affirming relationship with themselves. They have not fallen for that. I call it like a toxic viral program, this self-loathing, because it runs in entire societies, families. It gets passed on, gets it's normalized, and yet it's as we know from research, it leads to anxiety, depression, fear of failure, unwillingness to try again in the face of failure. I mean, basically the opposite of resilience. And so sovereignty it is many things, but in this one example, it's having this life affirming relationship with yourself.
So you're making a link between self-loathing and self-criticism, which is very interesting. And it seems that many people will admit to being self-critical, but don't necessarily see that as necessarily symptomatic of any kind of self-loathing.
Exactly. It's normalized. We think, well, don't I need to be self critical for self improvement? It's like, actually, you just need to be self aware, right? If you're aware that, oh, hey, my statistics aren't that great, like I need help or I need to train myself to get better at it. That's self awareness. Self criticism is the words people say to themselves when they've made a mistake. And, whenever I teach on Zoom, when I ask people, okay, tell me the words that you said to yourself last time you made a really big mistake, and people use the chat feature, you see these words coming through, you're such an idiot, you don't belong, you always do this, and it
Mhm.
goes on and on and on. And you see it all like populating the chat really fast, and you read it and you think, oh my gosh, this is the words that human beings tear themselves down with. And it's so heartbreaking. And then I say, okay, so what would you say to your best friend who just made the same mistake if they call you devastated? What do you say to them? The words are, you're okay, this is normal, everybody makes mistakes, you'll be fine, all these sort of compassionate words. And you're thinking, it doesn't make any sense. Why do we have a different relationship with ourselves, a destructive one, a abusive one? It's an abusive one, a toxic one. It doesn't make any sense. And what's the difference between you and your best friend, you live in different bodies. Like, that's the only thing. There's no
Mhm.
actual difference. So, um, but I don't, again, Sharon, it's just so normalized. People just think it's normal that, but if we look at it, we complain about being in toxic relationships or toxic workplaces, but most people are in toxic relationship with their own selves, and that keeps them from being sovereign.
Well, I think it's not only normalized, but it's often considered the key to success.
Yes.
That's the way to get ahead, and I think when one, really looks, of course, it's not.
It's not, but it is seen that way. I mean, I know being at Yale and then at Stanford and just seeing, these, and in Silicon Valley, New York City, I mean, highly um, high achieving, highly successful people, and yet you often see they're in a very self-destructive relationship with themselves, highly self-critical, and it's so sad, actually. There's so much burnout, and I remember just looking around the campuses and being like, "There's something not quite right here with this," And actually, I want to share a study with you that where some of my colleagues asked Yale undergraduates, "What emotions do you feel most of the time?" And you would think, "Oh, geez, these people are like the 1% who got in. They should feel elated and proud and whatever else." And the two emotions that they felt the most were stressed and tired.
Mm.
And then when you ask them, "What do you want to feel?" What do you think it is that they want to feel?
Rested?
You want to feel loved.
Oh.
It is so heartbreaking when you think about it because it's like somewhere along the line, high achievers have fallen for the idea that if if they're going to get loved, they need to be highly successful. So in the process of becoming highly successful, they're in a very toxic, self-destructive relationship with themselves, putting themselves aside and beating themselves and working themselves into the ground. But the thing is, like, no amount of success, no amount even of love from others will make up for the hole in your heart due to a lack of love for yourself. And that's the heartbreaking part about it. And that's where your beautiful teachings come in.
Oh, well, thank you. So here's a quotation from your book. Sovereignty is your song. To quote Gurudev Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, there is a song deep inside you. You are born to sing a song and you are preparing. You are on stage holding a mic, but you are forgetting to sing. You are keeping silent. Till that time, you will be restless until you can sing that song which you have come on the stage to sing. It doesn't matter if you feel a little bit out of tune for a minute or two. Go ahead, sing. A beautiful quotation.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite quotes. It's so profound. And when you look at a little child, especially if they're raised in sort of a healthy environment, they're full of interest and possibility and potential, and they're motivated towards and attracted towards doing certain things and learning about certain things and expressing themselves. And then as the child grows into adulthood, sometimes some of those things seem to get suppressed, whether it's from things they learn, their environment, from trauma, from and a whole host of possible things. And then you see that 70% of people on their deathbeds regret not living the life they live. And just think, what's going on there? And I feel like we're living at a time on our planet that's so critical. It's so critical that we all show up at our fullest expression of ourselves. Every single person comes to this planet with very different perspective, gifts, expression, and my wish is for everyone to be able to show up with that full sovereignty of expression of the beauty of who they are. And I think that's what this quote speaks to. It's like everyone has a song. Everyone is an important piece of this puzzle. When they can come out, when they can express themselves at their best. And that's what, to me, is sovereignty.
So you have a warning of sorts in the book that some readers may find it challenging since it
Mhm.
confronts our own self imposed limitations. I'd certainly say that was the case for me. I'm wondering if that was your personal experience as you worked with all the materials in the book.
So, will you share with me, Sharon, what was challenging for you?
Well, everything was, I mean, because my life has been, centered on meditation practice, for example.
Yes,
People often ask me if I had doubt. And I would say from
yes.
the first moment I started practice, which was January 1971, I've not had doubt. In fact, in the kind of truth in the process, that there was truth there. My doubt was really occasionally it would be about something someone told me, a teacher, but mostly was centered on myself. And I remember teachers of mine saying things to me now, which were kind of funny at the time, but I realized they were all around that theme, like my teacher, Menindra, saying, the Buddha's enlightenment solved the Buddha's problem. Now you solve yours. And it was almost like somebody saying, you can solve your problem. In fact, you can solve the problem of the confusion and unhappiness that has brought you here to India to begin with. And many teachers would say many things to me all
Mhm.
around that same theme. And I thought, yeah, that was my biggest hindrance.
Wow, very interesting. Yeah, I mean, certainly the topic of this book is one that, um, resonates personally, and I feel like, some of the some of the things I've had to work through personally, because I became very aware of the self-loathing, um, in a very concrete way for many years, and, in fact, I was in an abusive, relationship, and I really got to confront that, like, wow, like, okay, how are you gonna handle this? Are you gonna allow the self-loathing to manifest on the outside? Is that how you're gonna live your life? Or are you going to open your eyes and see how you're living and change things around? And I remember Thich Nhat Hanh, he came to Stanford when we hosted him, and he gave each one of us a calligraphy, and it was specific for each person.
Mm.
He had met us before, but maybe he met us, in the subtle or something. May have his ways. And I remember the one he gave for me said, "Healing oneself, healing the world." And I have it in my room, always looking at it. It's like, yes, it's when I only someone who's been to somewhere can help others there, right? So, and I definitely had a journey with self-loathing, and I think when my kids were born, it became really apparent, and to me, because of the amount of stress that you go through without sleeping and all that for a long time. And I remember one day, and I knew about research on self-compassion, and I was really working towards it, but I also could see the depth of the programming, the conditioning, that I think is is generational. I mean, if your parents and their parents and so forth, it's almost in your genes sometimes, it feels like. And I felt like, wow, like, when is this gonna get deprogrammed? And I remember one day I was, had my second baby, and I was in this sort of postpartum haze, and I think I voiced something out loud, self-critical, but I'm like, "I just can't do this parenting. I just can't I just can't do it." Something like that. And then a few weeks, later, I saw my oldest son, frustrated with something he was trying to do and failing at, and he said, "I just can't do." I can't remember exactly what my words had been, but it was clear to me that his words were the same as my words had been, and I thought, "Wow, really? Like, am I going to pass this on, or is the buck going to stop here?" And and I have to say, I'm on the other. I mean, I feel like I'm on the other side of that now, and grateful every day, because it was a journey, but it definitely helped me to write that chapter, from a really deeply personal place, but also because I work with, a lot of leaders, and especially women leaders, and I see all these women that are just so talented, and then they'll come up to me and be like, "Well, I get an A in leadership and a D in parenting," and they walk off, and my heart breaks for them. But then there are other parts of the book too that I know I'm still on the journey, but what I love about writing a book is, you remind yourself always of I remind myself of what is sovereignty, for example, in the chapter on emotions. I mean, and that's been my field of research, as a psychologist. I talk about how do we get bound with regards to our emotions. Well, no matter how educated we are, no matter how much training we have, how many black belts or whatever we have, chances are we have as much training about what to do with our big, bad, negative emotions as a 5-year-old, which is none. And so most people, and most of the audience I talk to from any part of the world, actually, most of them will say that, what do they do with their big, bad, negative emotions? Suppress them. That's kind of what we're generally sort of taught, and research shows that suppression actually makes the emotion worse, stronger. It beats up your body. It harms your relationships. I mean, there's nothing good about it. And yet it's what everyone does because we've never been taught otherwise. And we don't have that emotional training really. And yet, and Sharon, I know that you know this too well, but like it's through experiencing and allowing the emotion that it can be digested and can be cleared in a sense. And I mean, that's how what you see in a little child, they just have their tantrum and boom, it's out, it's gone. 5 minutes later, they're just fine. But as adults, we can stuff that inside and keep it inside for the rest of our lives, the anger, and it can impact us so much. And so one of the things I talk about is that. And I think in our world, a lot of people want to offer us a lot of things to make sure we don't feel, right? It's just like, hey, eat this, look like this, buy this, do this program, blah, blah, blah. I mean, that's how people get stuck in an addiction cycle, and here I share my own like personal story about this. This is my first meditation experience, Sharon. I was at Yale as an undergraduate, and Yale was meditation was considered really weird. And then at the time at Yale, anyway, there was just 3 of us who meditated on campus. But this is 97, so I actually didn't really want to meditate, but I wanted to meet the guy that went to the meditation session. So I actually just went, and I didn't know I was walking into this Korean Zen strict practice. So, you'd go in and you'd sit and stare at the floor for an hour with little to no instruction except don't move. And for a 20-year-old, that's this is a bit challenging for the first meditation practice. And I remember leaving and feeling like, all right, I feel more peaceful, but I'm never doing that again. And then the next day, I came into my dorm room, and now at the time I had an eating disorder where I would binge whenever I felt down, which was a lot because I really wasn't that happy. And the next day I walked into my dorm room and I saw this leftover pizza that looked disgusting. Actually, it didn't even look appetizing, but I thought, oh, great, I can binge since I'm feeling down. And in that moment, and this was something I would do all the time, I'd been doing for years. And but in that day, after the meditation, something happened. I got this moment of insight. And it was this thought that said, you always cry after you binge. Why don't you just cry first and then you can binge later? That was the insight that came. I thought, okay, fine, deal. I'll do that. So I went on my bed and I cried. And when I was done crying, I sat up and the desire to binge was gone. It's gone. And that was the last day that was the last day of my eating disorder. Not to claim that this is the solution for everyone. It was for me. But what I realized was like, yeah, you got to feel it to heal it. That's it. You got to feel it. And it sucks and it's hard. And, sometimes when I share this stuff on social media about like allowing yourself to feel, people tell me to like F off, because I'm like, I get it. Like it's hard. It's hard to suffer, but it's also the only way out is through, and there are tools you can use to help yourself, obviously. But regarding this, like this morning only, like my kids were going nuts and I'm feeling stress coming up and I'm like, okay, like I'm just gonna feel it. I can't change it, but I can feel it. This is what's going on right now.
Kind of a corollary that I have read about, not being a psychologist myself, some saying in kind of current psychological thinking, if you need to name it to tame it. And that if you
Yes.
can name the feeling, it's giving you, perhaps, assuming you don't name it with like loathing or terror or something, but you're naming it to acknowledge it, then it's giving you a certain relationship to that feeling. And it's all that relationship, that holding environment that is going to be transforming.
I love that. Yeah, the awareness.
So something in what you're saying, also reminded me of something that was a theme in some of my writing a few years ago, which was the stories others tell about us that we kind of absorb and live
Yes.
out and get defined by. And I remember I was teaching once in Kentucky, and somebody challenged that. Somebody brought it up, and someone in the room challenged it and said, "I don't see how people can tell a story about us. They don't really know us." And I said, "Everything tells a story about us. Architecture may tell a story about us if we're in a wheelchair, or if, we're differently abled, and people certainly, whether they know us or not, that's the whole point. People make assumptions about other people. And our
Mm,
conditioning, as you say, weaves a certain narrative about who we are and what we're capable of. And when we take that to heart, maybe not even realizing it, we live it
mm,
out. And that some part of
yes.
this process seems to be, first of all, recognizing those stories and disentangling from them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love that. And in Sovereign, I talk about one of the women who came to one of our women's leadership programs at Yale, and her name is Star, and an African American lawyer who was working for the government, and she told me she was wrestling with something, and I said she was wrestling. You could tell, and we got close during that week, and I've been friends ever since. And she would, but I remember at the time she's like, as a Black woman, you're told to stay safe, and you're always trying to stay safe, and it's the kind of, even the people around you tell you to stay safe, stay safe in this sort of government job, but but part of her was yearning to grow beyond that. And you could tell in our program she was one of the leaders in the class. Like, she has so much leadership potential, she has so much potential, period, of things she could do beyond what she was doing, and she was feeling really frustrated, and in a position that I think she probably felt she had grown out of already. And um and she, but she was sort of trapped in that story of what she should be doing, a story she had internalized as from her culture, but also from the trauma of being a Black woman, and from just the history, and all the things. And then she finally, fought against the programming and decided to apply for jobs. And not only did she get into like a major company, but she was offered multiple positions there, and did amazing. But first you have to, and she talks about this too, you've got to stare it down. You've got to stare the belief down. It's like a staring contest, so it doesn't control you. So that's the piece, that's the awareness. And the second piece, and that's always, and like what I talk about in Sovereign, is it's an equation. It's like awareness is primordial, super important. But after that comes courage. It's like awareness plus sovereignty is awareness plus courage plus a full tank. I talk about that later, but like this courage piece too is like, okay, I'm aware. All right, now I need to do things differently. Boy, that's scary. This is where courage comes in, and she did it, and she's thriving.
It's wonderful. And there's another kind of big theme in your book, which is self compassion. So maybe it's awareness
Hmm.
plus courage plus self compassion, which maybe gives us the
Yes.
courage. So early in the book is a chapter on our relationship to ourselves and the inner critic. And I'm wondering if you can go further into your definition of self compassion.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting because I remember self compassion just feeling so theoretical, and because it's, okay, gotta be mindful of my emotions. I've got to treat myself like a friend. To just speak to yourself like a friend, and remember that everyone makes mistakes, and that's all true. But sometimes, and having worked also a lot with veterans, and myself tending to be so in the head and more intellectual, I really always am yearning for a more embodied approach, because I think that's where like the rubber meets the road, at least for myself. It has to become concrete, not just in the head. And so one way that I like to think about it is, when you're taking care of a pet or a child, you're aware, when was the last time they ate, when was the last time they drank, like when was the last time they rested, they went outside, got their wiggles out. But then for ourselves, we can just go through the day, skip a meal, not sleep enough, not eat right, or whatever it is, right? Not move. And so I like to think of it in a very pragmatic way. And I think that can help also for people to just concretize, like, what does this mean? And so I have to, for this, I'll do for myself too, is like, okay, what do I need right now? And I mean, I love how Chris Germer, he differentiates between the critical, am I good enough, to the self-compassionate, what's good for me right now?
Mm.
And this idea of what do I need right now? What's good for me? And just really think of it even in physical terms. Okay, right now, maybe I just need to crawl under a warm blanket and feel comforted. Maybe I need to take a nap. Maybe I need to, whatever it is, especially in those hard moments, making it very concrete. But yeah, so that's one of the ways that I like to think about it and share about it, because I think it makes things tangible.
So self-compassion also figures a lot in what you were talking about before, like how do we relate to ourselves when we've made a mistake? And
Mhm.
shame is another topic you touch in this same realm.
Mm.
So here's a quotation. Shame makes you forget how powerful you really are. In fact, it strips you of your power. Self-compassion is the antidote. It makes you sovereign again.
Yeah. A lot of this book came to me, like, and I would hear these words and I would write them down. Um, and they definitely came from personal experience, but also just, yeah, it just felt like I just heard them. I had different parts. I would just quickly take a piece of paper and write them down. But, shame is indeed so disempowering. And I think, and there are, different leaders in our lives that could have made us feel shame, whether it was a school teacher or whether it was in society, a leader or society itself. It's a form of power, holding power over someone, because you strip them of their power. And then when you're doing that to yourself, because you've somehow internalized that, in that moment, you have disempowered yourself, which is heartbreaking, because it's the opposite of the life affirming, life supportive, loving, non-toxic relationship with yourself, right? So, and sovereignty is not, I mean, when we feel shame, there's nothing you could do about it. You just feel it. You allow yourself to feel it, but being aware, this is not the truth. This is just what I'm feeling right now. Um, I tell a story in the book about, I had a keynote that I was supposed to give online on a Saturday, and I usually don't work on the weekends. And I'd been planning this keynote for 6 months with the organizers. And then that Saturday, I took the kids to the park and I forgot about the keynote. And I was an hour away from home when I got a text that said, "Are you having trouble logging on?"
Oh no.
I felt I could tell you I felt shame that day, and it felt like a full-bodied bodysuit, like a shame bodysuit. And self-criticism would have me tear myself down even more, right? But I remembered self-compassion. I was like, "No, I just gotta be with this right now. I'm gonna be with this. I'm be with the shame, and it's really uncomfortable, but I am with this shame." And I was with it for like 2 hours and drove home, recorded a talk, sent it to them, told them to cancel my honorarium, did all the things. But I wasn't gonna make things any worse by adding flame to the fire. Isn't shame itself painful enough? But yeah, it does. It strips of our sovereignty. But again, just having that awareness and not letting it go any further into defining who you are.
Mhm.
That's the yeah, that's the
Well, it's another one of those mental states that, promises the world, like, if you only practice getting more and more shame, you'll be better off, you'll be more successful, and in fact, it's just debilitating.
it's the opposite. It's the opposite. And yeah, it really is. Mm,
So you say in the book that research shows self-compassion has a significant positive association with happiness, optimism, positive mood, wisdom, well-being, and personal initiative. I'd love to hear more about what you're seeing in self-compassion research.
I mean, it really is the foundation of resilience, of psychological resilience. Maybe maybe many of us have experienced being in a toxic relationship, either with a colleague, a work colleague, or a romantic relationship, or even a friendship. And we know how draining that is. It's so draining. And when you think about if that's our relationship with ourselves, that's a 24/7 relationship. I mean, that's intense. That is the opposite of creating the foundation for um, a life where where you're able to live in your fullest potential and your fullest resilience. But when you are there for yourself, so I love the quote. There are two quotes that I just love and live by. One is Maya Angelou's, "I learned a long time ago that the wisest thing I can do is to be on my own side," which is so beautiful.
Mm.
And then Audre Lorde, "Self-care is not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare." And, of course, them being two Black women having to face, the racism plus misogyny plus the many obstacles in their lives. And Audre Lorde also is an activist, playwright, and self-described gay Black woman in a straight white man's world. But her quote in particular is so powerful because, we often think, oh, well, self-care, self-love, like it's just so, frivolous, but she says it's not self-indulgence. It's an act of political warfare. Why? Because how are you going to show up on the battlefield of your life? Are you going to show up limping because you kicked your way there? Or are you going to show up in brand spanking new armor, strong and resilient because you loved your way there? To me, that says it all.
Mm. It's fantastic. It's really great. And since we're on the topic of self-compassion, maybe this is the moment to bring loving kindness into the conversation.
Yes.
You have it as a practice in the book, and I noticed you mentioned some research that
Mm-hmm.
you and your colleague Sendri Hutchison found that loving
Yes.
kindness increases feelings of connection and well-being, as
Mm.
well as broad beneficial impact on anxiety and depression. And I'm wondering if you could share more about those findings with us.
Well, I remember when, first meeting you, Sharon, at the Mind and
Yeah.
Life Institute. I think it was the second Summer Research Institute way back when. And many people were doing research on mindfulness. And I just kept feeling this attraction to loving kindness, also having read your book and being such a fan of yours. And also just loving the open heartedness of the practice. It just felt, it just felt really warm, and it felt nourishing, and just that heart practice. So I remember reaching out to you when we were running the study, and you guided me as to how we should write out the. I think I wrote out the text and sent it to you for approval,
Mhm.
and then we ran this study where we wanted to see, can we make people feel closer to strangers, and how long will that take? And we found that in a 7-minute practice. Um, People would do this task, which was like a subliminal task where we would measure how quickly they would respond to strangers using this task. And we found that after this 7-minute practice, people who had practiced loving kindness meditation as compared to another form of mental imagery, um, were subconsciously showing more feelings, greater feelings of connection to strangers that they had directed this loving kindness meditation towards. They had been directing the loving kindness meditation toward pictures of strangers. And it's just so powerful to me that in 7 minutes, you can do this. And I have to share another personal example here. I was in New York City, and I needed to get to the airport, but I had to stop at a friend's house to grab a package from her. And I got in this cab, and he said, "I'm not stopping. I don't stop. This is rush hour. Like, I'm not doing this." And I said, if the package is with her doorman, I'll just run in really fast, grab the package, run back out." He was really mad. But anyway, we went to this building, and I got out, and I go to the doorman. And of course, the package is not there. My friend hasn't sent it down yet. And I'm waiting and waiting and waiting. And the doorman says, "That guy out there is really angry. That cabbie
Mm.
is so angry. Like, you sure you want to get back in that cab? Like, that guy is mad." And I was like, I had no choice. Like, I had to leave to go to the airport. Finally, I come out, probably after 5-10 minutes, I don't know. And the guy was fuming. And I get in the back of the car, and he is like speeding along, the highways around New York. He's speeding along, so much anger. And I thought, well, the only thing I could do right now is just sit back and do loving kindness. And I remember sitting back and just wishing him well from the back seat, and May you be well, may you be safe, may you live with ease, all the things. And you know what? By the end of that cab ride, he was showing me pictures of his kids.
Really?
Yes. And there is something so profound, yes, with the research, we can show that people feel subconsciously more connected to others. But I would be very interested in a study that looks at how others to whom you are directing this
Mhm.
feel, because I feel like it has an impact. And we know obviously, I think that my generating benevolence toward him, he experienced it somewhere he felt it. And we know that physiologically from research that when you are next to someone who is stressed, you've heard of it, like emotional contagion. When we're next to someone we're stressed, and then we could start to feel stressed, or someone's angry, we're feeling fine, all of a sudden we're blowing up out of nowhere. It's just like, what happened? It's emotional contagion. But also when you're very deeply connected with another person, like if you're having a heart to heart, your breathing synchronizes, your heart rate synchronizes, even the activity in your brain synchronizes. So there's this beautiful physiological resonance that happens between people. And I think we've experienced that. You can also experience that around the beautiful beings who've meditated for many years, like you, Sharon, and being around them and then starting to feel that inner peace. I know that when I first started getting interested in meditation in New York and going to the Tibet house and just or to some of the talks by the Tibetan monks that would come to New York. And I remember feeling like, well, I'm not sure I understand what they're talking about, but I definitely know how I feel around them. So there is a physiological resonance that happens. And I would be so curious, Sharon, we should run a study looking at the beneficiaries of loving kindness meditation and how their physiology changes.
It would be fabulous. Can you picture the, protocol? I mean, I would love it.
I know, wouldn't it be amazing? Well, it wouldn't be that complicated, because I think you'd have to have two people in a room, and you would give one of them the instructions to do loving kindness meditation, maybe with earphones or something, with their eyes closed. But they're in the meditation, they're directing to the other person, and the other person is just sitting there and maybe waiting their turn. And then
Mhm.
you measure any changes, during the session compared to maybe them sitting earlier in a chair without anybody in the room. I don't know, but we'd have to think about the scientific, making sure that it's a really clean design. But it would be really fascinating because, and I think I remember you directing us to do so. Like, when you walk by someone,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
send them benevolence. I love
Yeah,
that.
I would love that. Okay, let's think about that.
Yeah, we should. We should. And now that I teach leadership at the School of Management at Yale, and I look at the research on leadership, the leaders that are the most successful, have the highest revenue, the most engaged teams, the least amount of turnover, the better bottom line, are the leaders who have a benevolent leadership style, who lead with benevolence. And they end up doing the best. And it's like, well, it's no surprise. It's our fundamental need after food and shelter to have positive social connection with others. We feel safe around benevolence. We feel we can be ourselves around benevolence, and we feel like we're seen, heard, valued, appreciated, which is what everybody wants.
Well, someone told me years ago, and not being a scientist, I never, have read about it, since, but what they said then to me was that performance studies of all kinds showed that, like, a harsh, punitive environment, whether internally or externally imposed, would spike your performance, but briefly, and then you crash. And
Yeah.
that the best way, the most effective way, the most efficient way to succeed, to change a habit, to make progress in learning something is self compassion.
It is. It is, Sharon, and it's so crazy to me, and that's why I wrote that first chapter, that we are programmed for the opposite. And it could, programmed through our families, through our community, through our society. Even you give someone a compliment, they're like, "Oh, no, 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 no." We don't even take it in. There's this exercise that we do as part of our executive education programs that I love, where before they come in, we ask them to ask for feedback from people in their families, communities, workplaces. And the kind of feedback they're asking for, though, is only for when they showed up as their best self. And then we collect that feedback and we have them read it all in one packet the day before the class starts. And they feel like they're reading their eulogy. They report crying, they report feeling very profound emotions, because we're so used to asking for negative feedback, receiving negative feedback, focusing on the negative, and then people walking around feeling they're not good enough, feeling that focusing on everything that's going wrong with them. And yet there's so much beauty in everyone, but we have forgotten. I mean, how often do people even compliment someone else, right? It's like the barista who's always smiling no matter what, no matter how, tiring their job is, and they're making every single person's day better, whether that person realizes it or not, because they're offering this micro moment of benevolence, micro moment of positivity. But it's, so many people walking around. What I notice in our classes is they had no idea what a difference they made. And sometimes people will report stories. On this one day, you did this one thing that changed my life, blah, blah, blah. These
Mhm.
people don't even remember ever doing that because that's just not, So yeah, I don't know, Sharon. That's why we got to decondition. You're in the process of deconditioning and deprogramming this for people, and that's why also I wrote that book, because I was like, this is just not this is not normal to have a toxic relationship with yourself. It's just
Mhm.
not.
Mhm. So you go on in the book to explore relationships to others, to our own intuition, and to our bodies. And so there are a lot of rich topics, and they're all supported by research, which is so great.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's I was trying to think. I mean, there's just so many different ways of approaching the sovereignty, but fundamentally, it is about our relationship with ourselves and how that connects to all those things. Like, for example, our intuition. I think intuition's often brushed off as this magical thinking, but research shows that it's a very um, sophisticated instinct designed to save our life. My friend Kushal was in the Twin Towers during 9/11, and the guards were saying, everyone stay inside. And he had an intuition to run, and he ran, and he saved his life that day.
Mm.
And, you know, um, neuroscience research shows that when we're making a very complicated decision, like Kushal was making in that situation, with a lot of different things to weigh, you're actually going to make a better decision when you go with your intuition rather than your cognition, your logic, because our logical mind is actually quite slow moving, and our intuition is very, very rapid, and it can pick up things below our logical perception. And yeah, and I mean, the military's been studying this for years, and it's a really powerful ability that we all have, and but that we've been programmed out of, but also we're so distracted constantly that we're not even tuning in. And I think through meditation, and when you talk about insights, and you're at the insight center and so forth, I mean, I often think how many you could think of insight as a form of intuition, as a form of receptivity. So I love Albert Einstein. He has this quote where he said, the logical mind is a faithful servant, and the intuitive mind is a divine gift. Paraphrasing, it's something like this. And he says, we have a society that honors the servant and has thrown away the gift.
Mm.
And, and it's so interesting because that's pretty much what we've done. But Einstein he would get his insights while playing Mozart. And he would put himself in that alpha wave state, which is when the brain is, you could think of it, a meditative state of mind. It's not highly focused, it's not lethargic, it's in between. And that's the moments of insights, right? That's when you get these creative insights, innovative insights. And we know that that's when the mind is most creative, most innovative. Of course, Einstein relied on that, and many artists have relied on that. And yet we live in a society where we're distracted all day long, from the moment people roll over and grab their phone to the end of the day, focused on a screen, focused on something, consuming, depriving themselves of their own innovative, insightful genius, which we're all born with, and which we can see in little kids. Unless those little kids have been put on a screen, they're always in that state. And that's why they're so inventive and so innovative and so enthusiastic too.
No, I'm not a research scientist, as I said, and you are. So I want to take advantage of this moment when I have you for conversation, and uh, ask you some questions about some of the science and meditation, and
Yes.
the way that's moved. So the last time you were on this podcast was way back in 2017, and I'm sure a lot has happened since then in that field. So I wonder if we can talk a little bit about a few different topics. So, what does research reveal about how meditation affects us?
There is now such a large body of research. It's interesting when I was in grad school and I was given the advice, oh, you don't want to be pegged as just a meditation researcher. And now I'm
Mhm.
like, well, actually, you know, fast forward to now, that's such a huge field of research. Um, I mean, certainly it is meditation promotes emotional intelligence in every capacity. So the ability to be self-aware, to regulate one's emotions, to experience more positive emotions, to create more. I like to think of it as stress resilience. Right, you're training your mind to be in a more aware, a less reactive state, and there's just so much evidence now that we just like we train our muscles at the gym to be stronger in life, you're training with meditation, you're training your brain and your nervous system, your entire nervous system, to be more resilient and strong as it goes about life. And I think we focus so much on the body, but we forgot to focus on the mind. And that's so I like to think of meditation and also breathing practices, which is what a lot of what I've done
Mhm.
research on, as this form of sort of stress resilience. And in a time when stress is so high, I mean, no matter where you are, where you live, stress is commonplace. And I was reading an anthropologist book the other day who was saying that in traditional indigenous cultures that are still existent today, living in traditional ways, but also in the past, it it wasn't normal to be in a stress mode. You were in a parasympathetic mode most of the time, unless you were in danger, because that's where our body is recuperating, rebuilding itself, and sustaining itself, and building on itself. But we live in this very strange time where we're mostly in a stress, in a high, sympathetic activation. And okay, if that's how it's going to be, then we absolutely need to do the opposite of that and train ourselves to cope with that by becoming more stress resilient.
And can you tell me about the science of happiness? What's that really all about?
Well, I think there's two ways that researchers have looked at happiness in particular. One is sort of this idea of hedonic happiness, which is sort of the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, money, power, fame, social media following, whatever it is, that gives you that little dopamine high, and then it crashes and it leaves you craving for more. And I think our whole society and economy is driven by this, right? Like, let me just buy more, buy more. Okay, I want more. Okay, and you're constantly chasing that high that really you can never reach. You can never extend the way you want it to be, because it crashes. But then there's this eudaimonic happiness, and eudaimonic happiness is the form of happiness that extends beyond yourself. So hedonic happiness is really about me, myself, and I, right? Pleasure for myself. But eudaimonic is when is compassion, is be going, um, relating to something beyond yourself, either being there for others in a compassionate way, or connecting to, if you're spiritual, religious, connecting to the greater good, connecting to nature, help, being of service in some way. And that form of happiness, research shows, is lasting. It doesn't just come and go. It leads to fulfillment on a deeper level. If I were to summarize the research on happiness in one sentence, I would say this: the happiest people, who are also the healthiest and live the longest lives, by the way, because those go together, are people who live lives characterized by compassion for others, balanced with compassion for themselves. Because I think we all know people who give, but then on the inside are burning out, and then eventually they crash. And on the other hand, you can have people who, um, do all the self-care, but don't do anything for others. And for them too, that's not a it doesn't lead to that fulfillment they're looking for. So it's that beautiful balance. And I think our society, in a sense, trains us for neither, right? We're just, at least the marketing agents, trying to get us to buy stuff and trying to get us to focus on ourselves, um,
Mhm.
and not on others. And then there's this, in parallel, this program of self-destruction, self-criticism. So it's really ironic, but the science of happiness is quite simple, actually. It's being there for others, and again, doesn't mean you have to go to feed orphans in Somalia. It just that. that attitude of benevolence that you teach, Sharon, that attitude of benevolence towards others, balanced with benevolence towards oneself.
And I know you yourself have done significant research using, I think, breath work with veterans. And so that, of course, brings up the whole field of trauma and
Yeah.
tools and techniques that might ameliorate trauma and the pain of it in some way. So I wonder if you could say something about that.
Mm. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I have a real soft spot for veterans and the pain they go through. I mean, so many veteran suicides after coming back from missions in which they believed they were helping. They were putting their life on the line for others and then coming back unable to live with the trauma that they experienced, and oftentimes self-medicating with drugs, alcohol, because the traditional treatments, either therapeutic or pharmaceuticals, just don't work out for many of the veterans. That's what the research shows. So we thought, okay, should we do a meditation study? But then we also, consulting with the VA that was nearby when I was at Richie Davidson's lab, they were seeing a lot of dropout. And I understood that because I was in New York during 9/11, and after 9/11, I had really debilitating anxiety myself. And I tried to be mindful of that. But having so much anxiety, I just became extremely aware that I was anxious, and it became unbearable to sit there. And so I had walked into a breathing class put on by some of my classmates at Columbia at the time. And it was the Art of Living class that teaches the sky breath meditation. And I remember hating it and thinking, "What is this?" But then I realized that my nervous system was starting to regulate, and I was able to sleep again and just sort of move on with my life. So fast forward 10 years later, when I was in Richie's lab and wanting to work with the veterans with trauma, I thought, well, maybe the breathing will work for them, because and I understood this idea that, like, when you have this much anxiety, it's really hard to sit and close your eyes and be aware of your thoughts and feelings, because you kind of you want to explode. And so I had them. We ran a study then with, one group went through the sky breath meditation protocol, and the other did not. And those who did, many of them were just like, "What's this hippy dippy?" They were just there for the money. But the veteran population is one that has a real show me attitude, and within a couple minutes of doing some of the breathing, they're like, "Okay, all right, like, I get it. Like, I can feel the difference, And and by the way, if anyone listening is interested in veterans or military family learning this, they actually can learn it at no cost through a nonprofit called Project Welcome Home Troops. But anyway. So that study was really amazing, because we saw that in a week their anxiety had normalized, and both they reported that, but also physiologically we saw that they were reacting much less with much less startle response to things that had before the program had really been very startling for them. So and compared to the control group, they had this significant improvement in a week, but it was maintained a month and a year later, which was really astounding to us, because it showed that in a way we had reset their nervous system back to sort of a normalized nervous system. And it was actually there was a documentary film called Free the Mind that followed some of the veterans, and you can see the shift in how they improve. And then, so most recently, that study was replicated at the Palo Alto VA with a bigger sample of veterans, with both men and women. And then it was compared to the gold standard therapy for post-traumatic stress, which is cognitive processing therapy. And what we found was that, and the design was to show that sky was not, it's called a non-inferiority design. So you wanted the statistics looked to see whether the sky breathing is inferior to or not inferior to CBT. And what they found was that it has equivalent benefits to the cognitive processing therapy. And then in another paper, we found that actually at the level of the brain, the sky breath meditation had superior benefits in terms of emotion regulation. And I think one of the reasons is that, it's these active breathing practices that are in this protocol are they're going right into the nervous system. So they're not just sort of this cognitive exercise, because when you have trauma, it's physiological. Like Like, I remember this one veteran being like, "I know there's nothing wrong in the mall. I'm in Wisconsin, but I have to brace myself for 20 minutes to go in." There's nothing wrong with his cognition, but the
Mhm.
trauma lodged in the body, like the body keeps the score, that book, like it's true. And so I think what the breathing does is it helps to sort of reset the nervous system at a physiological level, thereby allowing you to function in that more resilient space. And so what a lot of the veterans say is, I remember what happened, but I can move on. Whereas before they
Mhm.
remembered what happened, but it was still right in front of their face as they're trying to live their life.
Mhm. So it's been wonderful as always to connect with you, and it's always great to hear about your work. And a big congratulations again on the new book, and I'm sure it will be of great benefit to many. So I'm hoping that before we finish, you might be able to lead us in a practice of some
Oh,
kind.
yes. Absolutely. I would love that. Okay. So this is a practice that I learned from my meditation teacher, Gurudev, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar. It's called Panchakosha. It leads you through the different levels of your being. So let's sit with our eyes closed. We can have our hands on our lap, palms facing up. You can roll your shoulders a little bit, your neck, and sit comfortably and relax. Let's take a deep breath in and let it go. And listen for the sounds in your environment. Whatever sounds are there, whether it's traffic in the distance or birdsong, maybe the sound of the white noise or people talking. Accept all the sounds that are there. Welcome all the sounds. Deep breath in and breathe out, relax. Bringing your awareness to the body, and being grateful for this body, this beautiful gift. Bringing your awareness to the feet, the knees, thighs and hips, the abdomen, relax the abdomen and lower back, the chest and upper back. Relax the shoulders, the upper arms, elbows, forearms and hands, the throat, the back of the head, the jaw, the cheeks, the forehead, and the top of your head. Deep breath in. And as you breathe out, relax the whole body, the whole body, the whole body. Deep breaths in and out. Bring your awareness to the mind, the thoughts in the mind. Welcome all the thoughts. Let them come. Let them wander. Welcome all the thoughts with open arms. Pleasant thoughts, unpleasant thoughts, welcome them all. Be at peace with whatever thoughts are there. Bring your awareness to the feelings, pleasant feelings or unpleasant feelings. Welcome all the feelings. Deep breaths. Welcome all the feelings. Be at peace with any feelings that are there. You are peace. You are love. Take a deep breath in and let it go. Bring your awareness back to your body. Deep breath in and out. You can gently stretch the body with your eyes closed. And bring your awareness back into the room. And when you're ready, you can slowly open the eyes.
Well, that was wonderful. Thank you so much for leading that and for being here today and for all of your work, really. And for anyone who wants to hear Emma's first appearance on the podcast, you can hear her on episode 53, which was part of the Real Love series we did in 2017. And let's not wait so very long before you come back next time.
Sharon, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure to speak with you and learn from you. And, I've been your fan since since before I was in grad school. So basically since right when I read your first book after undergrad, and you're just the best.
Thank you. As are you.
Hey folks, thanks so much for listening. If you'd like to learn more about Emma's work, you can head over to her website, emmaseppälä.com. That's EMMASEPPALA.com. And her new book, Sovereign, is available in all the places, so please get yourself a copy. And for all things Sharon, including a free guided meditation or her new equanimity course that launches this week, you can head over to SharonSalzberg.com. This has been the Metta Hour podcast, brought to you by the Be Here Now Network. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, and may you live with ease.